Amma's skirt. Amma always wore this underskirt with a cotton string that went around her waist. She used it to tuck her sari in place. It must have been an unusual string, for if she was a trifle inattentive, it got lost inside the fold of the skirt, and she had to pull it out using ingenious methods. As this happened very often, Amma pinned a long safety pin to the string, so that whenever it disappeared inside the fold, Amma moved the pin along the edges, coaxing the string out inch by inch, like an earthworm crawling through a tunnel. This was a regular feature. It was quite some time before I realized that Amma had, in fact, two skirts, both deeply aged with the frequent rinsings and washing. They were both of the same cloth, length, and faded color. Amma, unfortunately, had only one length of string, so she had to transfer it from one to the other whenever she switched her skirts. Amma came from a reasonably prosperous family. She had brought 2 underskirts when she first came as a bride to her new house. The women in our village were not rich enough to wear skirts under their saris. A few of them had just one skirt for use during special occasions like weddings and festivals. It was rumored that only the wife of the Maniakar and Amma owned 2 skirts, a rarity in a poor village. Amma's face never failed to show her pride of her possessions. Appa's face, whether it was day or night, glowed like the afternoon sunlight. He was not in the habit of drinking, smoking bidis, or cigars, or gambling. He did not even have the habit of going to work. I never heard him speak a word against anything Amma said or did. Perhaps he had been like that from the day he married her. He was, indeed, a peace-loving man and an expert in palmistry. People from all over came to consult him. Sitting cross-legged, he would look intensely at the stranger's hands for a long time and utter his interpretations. I never saw anybody pay him for his predictions. Amma must have managed to run the family with the income she derived from her small paddy field and even smaller coconut plantation. She took great trouble during those days, I think, to hide our poverty from me. When Amma came home after bathing at the well, she shone with a rare kind of beauty, and her scent lingered on even after she was long gone. Tiny guava flowers that had missed their chance to become small fruits lay scattered all through her path and got stuck to her feet. Water dripped from her long hair that parted at her shoulders. Dust off her feet shimmered along the path where she had placed them, making imprints. She went straight to the clothesline, gave her wet skirt a good shake, and left it to dry in the sun. That was part of her daily routine. An incident that occurred much later made me realize how important that underskirt was to Amma. It was a status symbol. The prosperity of her parents' home was on the wane, and she knew that if she lost this skirt, it would be almost impossible to replace it. That made the skirt assume undue importance, and Amma hung onto it as if it was worth more than her life. Amma's eyes betrayed volumes of unshed tears, but when she laughed, her eyes took on an instant brightness. Her laughter looked fresh and rich, like something you cooked and offered to a god. Since it often came unheralded, it sounded loud and could be heard from quite a distance. She would then hasten to gather her laughter back, as if she did not want others to see how far-reaching its beauty could be. Like a schoolgirl, she would laugh loudly and then immediately close her mouth with both her hands, afraid she had committed a crime. Amma had a wooden chest that came with her as part of her dowry. She called it the China box, as it was decorated skillfully with etchings of Chinese kings, queens, and their maids. Amma opened the box only on special days. I waited for those rare occasions and would sit right in front of it. "Don't block the sunlight," she would say, and engage in an exploration of the box. All the wealth she had brought with her as a bride was in that box, and she would take the items out in her hands, one by one. The jewels, gold thread uppercloth and silver anklets which had been preserved since her last inspection, and gaze at them lovingly for hours. She allowed me to touch and even wear the upper cloth around my neck. It was clear that the jewels in the box were becoming fewer and fewer. On those occasions when Amma sat before the box, her face would be covered by a dark cloud. You could never predict what Amma would do, and when she would do it. When I was a baby, I was very puny, no matter what she fed me. The boy next door, Kanakama-san, was chubby, and whenever he came to play, the game ended with his beating me. Invariably, Amma arrived on the scene, scolded him, and sent him off. Something of that sort happened that day, and it was nothing very serious. It began with the boy forgetting my father's name, and with his beating me, as usual. I countered his attack by calling him Dumayan, a curse word reserved for adults. Like a giant bird in Puranic stories, Amma swooped down from nowhere, and instead of driving the intruder away, she hit my lips with her fingers. "Will you say that word again? Will you say it?" she asked over and over. It was very painful. For the first time, I was angry with Amma and quietly walked away where my legs carried me. My lips were full of golden-colored blisters where she hit me, and they shone in the evening sun. Among the kiluvai trees, a frog was expanding and contracting his throat, and sat with its legs wide spread, as if it had decided to swallow all the air in its vicinity. Even the frog showed its disapproval as I approached, by turning its back on me. I had always thought of my Amma as a wonderful mother, and had been well attuned to her thoughts and emotions. I thought that if I made the blisters on my lips bigger, I could get her to pity me. I longed to stroke Amma's cheek and run my fingers over the minute hair, like those on okra, on her upper lip. My legs did not move towards my house until the winds drove the sun away. It was a favorite pastime of mine to identify the night sounds with my eyes shut. After we finished eating our meals, the dinner time of rats began, and all the food left over became theirs. Amma came slowly up to me and rubbed her hand gently over my tear-stained cheeks. Sobbing softly, she hugged me very tightly, as if it were wrong to allow even the slightest gap between us. The skirt she wore had been drying in the sun throughout the day, and there was still some sun left on it. It made my breathing difficult, yet her embrace was so welcome that the entire room seemed to be filled with particles of joy. In those days, I was one of Amma's main worries. Amma's life had become one of many tribulations, none of which she was responsible for. To shield me from all of this was her primary duty. My mother's younger sister, my Chinanama, had been married off into a wealthy family. My hardships began whenever we visited her house. I was coached relentlessly into giving them the impression that our family was prospering just as well. Chinama possessed many kinds of looks, and for me she reserved one that she would give to a worm. She was lean and tall, and her mouth had the permanent expression of having forgotten something she wanted so much to say. Whenever I went to her house, I immediately felt the gold-bordered sari on her hip and the gold bangles on her wrists highlighted our poverty. Chinama had an oval-shaped set of mirrors, with a center mirror flanked by two others, like Lord Murugan in the middle of his consorts, Bali and Divanai. The way it enabled Chinama to look at her face, her back, and both cheeks all at the same time was a constant wonder to me. The mirrors were covered with a cloth that day, preventing me from exploring further their mysteries. There was a chair in Chinama's house, and sitting on that chair, with my feet dangling, holding the glass and the flies that sat on it with both my hands and sipping a popular drink of that time, I remembered Amma's often-repeated rule that it was not polite to drink to the last drop. Amma kept making eye signals at me. I drank a bit, looked at Amma's face, took another sip, looked at how much more was left, and repeated the cycle. It was torture. The unspeakable joy of drinking soda was ruined by the constant thought that some of it had to be left at the bottom. Finally, as if giving up half my life, I left just a tiny drop in the glass. Amma often said that my legs were spindly, wide apart, and had the capacity to move simultaneously in all directions. In order to fatten me up, Amma decided to feed me regularly with homegrown musutai spinach. On our neighbor's advice, she would go to great lengths to prepare it. She would cut the leaves uniformly small, add coconut scrapings, and half-boil it with moderate spicing. Its taste was something in between that of neem fruit and a young coconut. It was something discovered by a person determined to ruin the lives of all the skinny children of the world. Amma insisted that I eat my entire portion of this concoction in one go. An incentive was the prospect of avoiding the ladle, held upside down now and dangling before my eyes. The spinach added to my misery by turning up in our helpings of rice, too. Amma held out hopes of turning my body into a strong and golden one within just 40 days of consuming it. The wooden ladle in her hand swayed back and forth like a hungry cobra poised for action. I hid the loathsome preparation inside a handful of rice and swallowed it in one gulp. My tongue was never placated, and the taste lived in my mouth for many years. If the musutai concoction was my enemy, then Amma had to confront a worse enemy every day of her life. It was our next-door neighbor. Her cow was a very independent-minded creature. If it ever saw us lower our guard, it would enter our yard stealthily and nibble at the vegetables and greens Amma had planted and nurtured with infinite care. Amma would shout, "Close the yard gate," without so much as turning her head at the very instant the cow appeared outside the fence. The cow, to its credit, waited patiently, with unshakable faith in human oversight, for the right moment. The spinach grew plump and hearty, with Amma's loving care, until one day our bovine visitor stole in unnoticed and destroyed the bed. It uprooted the plants, shook them free of soil, and ate them up. But the spinach was just the appetizer. The cow then turned its attention to the entree. Browned by constant exposure to sun, torn at the edges, washed with a soap that never lathered, and dried crisply to the exact temperature to suit a cow's tongue, Amma's skirt, minus the tape, hung loosely on the line, wordlessly inviting our guest. The cow turned clockwise, reached out and caught the skirt in its mouth. Only when it had finished with the rims and come to the thigh portion did Amma see it. Eschewing all consonants, she produced a sound wholly made of vowels from her throat. She ran to what remained of the skirt and tried to pull it free, but the cow refused to let go. Amma pulled from one side and the cow the other. It ran to the picket fence, dragging the skirt and Amma on her knees with it. As it crossed the picket, the animal dropped the skirt and vanished the way it came. Amma sat there with the skirt spread on the ground. At the place where it had covered her thighs, there was now a hole big enough to let a child pass through. She sat, staring at it, for quite some time. A teardrop that set out from her eyes came to rest in the middle of her cheek, lacking the strength to continue. Amma's mouth muttered, "Dumayan, Dumayan." I began to understand the meaning of the word after the incident. The sight of Amma sobbing and pulling at the skirt never left my mind. Amma had now been downgraded to owning a single skirt. I don't remember hearing Amma's loud schoolgirl laughter ever again.